Hi everyone, I'm Vladyslav Novikov, and joining me again is Andriy Dobriansky, Director of Communication at the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Andriy, hello.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So the first question about Trump's sex scandal. He now owes 83 million for defaming a journalist, and today Democrats show what they say is a postcard from Trump to Epstein. So is this a big shock for Trump?
Trump has always been, throughout the last 40, maybe 50 years, involved in numerous, not just scandals, but also lawsuits resulting from those scandals. The ruling that made him liable for the sexual assault against the journalist is one that will likely stand. That was made 3 years ago, but since that time, President Trump has been successfully and unsuccessfully on different levels trying to fight uh, not just to get it overturned, which he will not. It's almost impossible to do that because of the way the ruling was made. But he's been trying to fight the penalty for it, and the penalty has increased every time he has lied about the case in public because it's a defamatory lawsuit. The fact that he slandered this person, and every time he repeated a lie, the penalty for that increased exponentially. So he's been trying to get rid of the penalty, but unfortunately, I think he'll keep on lying about the case and have the penalty increased, and therefore it'll be hard to overturn that. The most latest ruling is that he tried to get the entire case overturned. That's not happening, but he was successful in having at least one appeals court negate the financial penalty. We'll see if that gets appealed by the journalist lawyers. As far as the Epstein account, this is frankly just a big problem for President Trump. He included the Epstein conspiracy theorists in his election campaign in 2024. He wanted their support. He promised them to release all the information about Epstein. His team made up stories that he actually knew that Epstein was a criminal, and he kicked them out of his golf club and other things. But the more we find out about how close their friendship was, the fact that Jeffrey Epstein himself said that Donald Trump was his best friend for over 10 years, the closest friend he ever had. This is coming out in that postcard that you mentioned, which Trump initially denied it existed. He actually sued the Wall Street Journal and his good friend Rupert Murdoch, who has been so supportive of him over the years. But because Rupert Murdoch owns the newspaper that put out the initial report, Donald Trump sued them. Now that these files have been released by a congressional oversight committee, there's little for him to back up the fact that he can still sue Rupert Murdoch. I would assume that all those lawsuits will go away, and now he's just going to have to preserve his reputation somehow.
So this cases, this news is a shock for political circles or ordinary Americans.
Frankly, ordinary Americans aren't really following. For those who were following, the journalists in Washington, they just assumed that the Wall Street Journal had the right information. Uh, J.D. Vance, President Trump, his entire team denied that this letter existed, denied, denied, denied. And now that it's out in public, people were given the fact who the journalists were who printed the story first. Most journalists understood that these were people who probably had a physical copy of the letter and knew what it actually looked like. So now that the letter is public, they're vindicated, and it's just a matter of time until Trump withdraws his lawsuit.
Okay. Here in Ukraine, people want the Trump call himself a moral leader, but he's got big skeletons in the closet. And he wants to teach us about virtue.
Yes, I've made this point to people when he first ran for president in 2016. This is probably the first president in over 100 years who is not a regular church-going American or citizen. He does not, and we just saw this when he was at the beginning of this term in a church for a funeral where the bishop in the church implored the president to have mercy on undocumented immigrants in the United States, and he got angry at that. And as anybody who's a God-fearing person knows, it's about walking into a holy place and having humility, understanding that you are not in charge of everything, even as the president of the most powerful country in the world. And that is something clearly the president doesn't have humility in his everyday life. But to have somebody who doesn't understand what it is like to kneel before God, to repeat over and over, as we do in our Ukrainian churches, to ask for mercy from God, or in any kind of Christian tradition. This is something different for the United States, to have somebody who does not go regularly, kneel, ask for mercy, understand that as powerful as they are on this planet, in the afterlife, they are all beholden to the Creator, and it's a very big difference for the United States to have somebody as president who's never understood that concept. And so when you mention that President Trump wants to teach the world virtue, it is mostly through image and a facade, like he created his image on his famous game show, the Apprentice. It's not about what this person actually feels, because as most other presidents have, they have regularly gone and sought counsel from religious leaders. They have regularly prayed in times of trouble, and this is not something that we get from President Trump.
Yeah, it's not happy to hear it, because Russian keep continue hit Ukraine and keep and they killing us. And this show, it's about show for Trump, but for Ukrainian, it's about real life.
Yeah, and unfortunately, President Trump only focuses on soldiers, and every time he mentions the conflict, the attack on Ukraine, he talks about how both Russians and Ukrainians are being killed. And we know that the real crime, the reason that President Putin has a warrant for his arrest by The Hague, the reason that people are outraged about this, is not just the fact that so many children have been stolen, a crime dating back to the Nuremberg trials, something that we thought we had put past us as a society. But so it's not just the stealing of children, the eradicating of Ukrainian culture, the attempted genocide of Ukrainians, but it's also the indiscriminate civilian killings, including the pensioners who were killed in Donetsk this week. It's something that shocks people, but unfortunately does not get mentioned by the White House or President Trump on a regular basis, if at all. Mostly what they talk about is the fact that peace can be made by people, but as Ukraine has made very clear, it needs to be a just peace, because without a just peace, the war continues on.
Mm-hmm. The fact that Russia has gone so long without new sanctions, what does that tell us? Is Trump acting like Putin again here?
Trump has not put harsh sanctions on any power that he feels is stronger than the United States. He has taken away the sanctions on selling microchips to NVIDIA chips to China.
Yeah.
He has offered to have 600,000 Chinese students come into the United States to our universities. He is not confronting China in the way that he promised his voters he would. He is not confronting Russia. He is not confronting anybody. He used a Hellfire missile to attack a boat with 11 people in the Gulf of Mexico. Certainly, anybody who doesn't have the power to stand up to him, he will attack. But clearly, when he is confronted,
it means they are friends.
It means that he's afraid to act against them. And until he does, we can only say that he's afraid to do so. He wasn't afraid to attack Iran. He was confident that Iran would not hurt Americans. It seems that he's afraid to act against Russia and afraid to act harsher against China.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the next topic I'd like to discuss with you, Andriy, is Trump's relationship with the Federal Reserve. What are the last headline telling us?
President Trump does not think long-term strategically. He just wants what's best today, this week, what will make his ratings go up. At the beginning of this administration, the economy was on a much better footing. We were still adding jobs. We are not adding jobs anymore. So the economy in the United States has turned because of his tariffs. And so at the beginning of his term, he wanted He wanted a Federal Reserve to change which is an independent entity. Our central bank is independent, and he wanted the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates to, even though the economy was doing much better than other countries, he wanted to increase it even more. Now the economy is souring, and he wants the same kind of strategy from the Federal Reserve, which means that he does not care what the long-term effect of these rate changes are. He just wants something to make the economy better today. Even if the economy were to be helped by changes to the Federal Reserve rate for the short term, it's clear that because of the indicators for inflation in this country, that lowering the rate would simply increase inflation in the long term, and that's not helpful either to the United States or the rest of the world. So the problem is with the Federal Reserve is that, much like anything else, President Trump wants immediate results for something. Somebody told him that if the Federal Reserve does this, he will have a better economy, and therefore he will have better ratings. He is not thinking, though, in the long term, and that's the problem for not just the United States, but as we know, in the type of tariffs he's put on were some of the reasons that we had a bad economic recovery globally in the 1930s. So as the U.S. economy goes, unfortunately, so does the world, and that's why everybody's worried about his next steps.
Mm-hmm. So his tactic about Federal Reserve, it's a good idea or not? They have chance to win this game. I don't know. Trump maybe think about Lisa Cook. I destroyed her and I win this game.
Well, the other issue here is federal precedent. The Supreme Court is the removal of a Federal Reserve commissioner is something that has stood in the United States jurisprudence for over a century, and this is something that is right now being debated by the court. They issued a ruling about President Trump's ability to remove other people appointed by the White House, but when it's specifically in law of how you're supposed to appoint that person, this is where the Supreme Court has ruled for over a century that the president has to follow the law. It's not just that he has unitary power to do what he wants. So in this case, just simply the act of proposing to remove, and if the Supreme Court goes along with this would once again be another constitutional precedent that changes the way governments are run in this country. And so it's not just the effect on the world economy, it also centralizes power in a way that we have not had in this country since the 1930s.
Mm-hmm. If we talk about money, so I want to mention this news from the EU's. We hear US. We hear the EU should act first on sanction against Russia, but in reality, Europe is scared to move without Trump.
Yes, yeah, this has been the problem from the very beginning of the full-fledged aggression. We know that we had the argument about tanks. Well, we won't send Abrams until the Germans send their Gepards, and then and then we won't do that until the British send their Challengers. And who's going to be the first one?
Yeah.
And this is what involves diplomacy, but also more importantly, multilateral communications, which is not Trump's strong suit. He famously likes tearing up any agreements that multilateral. He wants to have on one-on-one agreement. Here with the EU, he needs to talk to all the various stakeholders, which he currently is not. He is talking to some people from the coalition of the willing, but he's not talking to all the European leaders. And therefore, whatever is the next step by the EU, as we know, it needs to be done in a coalition format. It's not just that Ursula von der Leyen decides something and then we all go along with it. So if President Trump is not convincing European leaders to do so, I doubt that they are going to act first. But unfortunately, as Scott Bessent has said, as many American members of government, as well as people in Europe, unless we put sanctions, unless we change something, Russia is not going to return to the negotiation table. There won't be another Alaska.
Mm-hmm. Given Trump's local scandals we just talked about, could that get in the way of a constructive dialogue with European leader on sanctions these days? After all, it all depends on Trump's mood and this moment, this scandal, and speaking about sanction, Europe, Russia, US, is good moment for this topic.
You know, the scandals are always going to happen. If we're talking about the Epstein scandals, that has included not just members of the British royal family, and President Trump will be visiting England on the 17th to the 19th, but also many Europeans as well. So I think President Trump is kind of immunized against any kind of issue in terms of talking with other world leaders. And frankly, it has been a long established practice of American presidents when they have a scandal at home to travel overseas and deal with foreign affairs where, frankly, the rest of the world doesn't really care about America's scandals. So.
Yeah. Okay. Trump promised to call Putin, but it hasn't happened yet. Could that call actually bring the war to an end?
I don't believe there's going to be a call. I mean, he has announced that this week in September, prior to traveling to the United Kingdom, he would have a phone conversation with Putin. I don't know if that's happening because a lot of the things he's said don't seem to make sense. He just had a speech yesterday where he announced that he just came back from Saudi Arabia. He was there in May, not in August. He also said that European leaders are coming to the White House this week. They are not. They were there earlier in August, and he's traveling to Europe. So I don't believe any European leaders are going to travel when Ursula von der Leyen does her State of the State on in the middle of the week. So so it seems that President Trump is even more confused than normal in terms of announcing what the next steps are. That's why I look to other members of the administration to hear what Scott Bessent are saying, what Marco Rubio is saying in terms of what actual meetings are going to happen. And frankly, I think that the President Trump's visit to the United Kingdom will be better for Ukraine than whatever he's talking about here. It's good to have a conversation with Keir Starmer. It's good to hear from the king when he has a visit with the king who supports Ukraine and helping Ukraine. So that'll be good for Ukraine, as well as when they all return to New York at the end of September, and he gets to speak with even more world leaders at the UN General Assembly, who will also tell him that they all stand in support of Ukraine and we should be doing something together.
Okay, I have one good news about all this. It's good for me because American media keep saying Putin is ignoring Trump deadlines. I think that's one of the few stories that actually rings true. But how big of an issue is it at the moment?
It's only an issue when it becomes an issue in President Trump's mind, and right now he's very comfortable with ignoring all
No.
the humiliation by Putin, Putin ignoring him. Frankly, because of the Epstein scandal, because of Robert F. Kennedy's comments about vaccines, because of President Trump's declaration of war on different boats in the waters around the United States, it seems that there are more scandals for the president to occupy himself in the United States, which means he's not talking as much to European leaders. He's not engaging with what Putin is doing, and Putin just simply going ahead and killing as many civilians as possible, which could be stopped if the United States came to action. But again, we saw a declaration of action in July only after President Trump met with world leaders at the G7. He met with them at the NATO summit. Here, again, I'm waiting until he goes into Europe and hears their perspective. I'm waiting until he has the UN General Assembly and everybody can clap for him if he makes an announcement about sanctions against Russia. But on his own, he will easily ignore what Putin is doing.
So in this moment, we see the picture where war between Russia and Ukraine is normal, seeing stuff. I don't know how to say, and Putin to continue hit the civilian, kill him, and it's all is normal picture for Trump, for media in the US?
It could be normal, except for the fact that this is a different war than we had even 6 months ago. The increase in rocket attacks, the increase in drone attacks, makes this a very different war than what we had in 2022, 2023. So President Trump can say that it's not his war, it's Biden's war. I like to point out to the White House that Biden's war is different than today's war. Today, we have an increase in children dying. We have an increase in civilians dying. And that's because of the increase in drone attacks and glide bomb attacks. Everything is increasing from Putin. And so therefore, that's the one thing that if people say, well, it's just the war in Ukraine. Well, no, that war that war is different. Now we've changed into a different type of war, and that will keep on coming back up in the news in the United States, much like what happened in Afghanistan when we withdrew there. So people should be worried about the fact that, if Trump isn't engaging, Ukraine and the European allies are going to have to find some other solution very quickly.
Trump said we lost India in Russia and now they're with China. But if that's true, shouldn't there be stronger action? The best way to hit Russia is by helping Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, with India, this is a diplomatic failure by President Trump. He insisted that India be like Pakistan and call for his Nobel Prize. He insisted that Prime Minister Modi come to the United States while the commander-in-chief of the Pakistani army was there. Just simply not understanding international diplomacy and how much it's one thing to insult a country like Ukraine. It's one thing to insult a country like South Africa when they come to the White House, but Modi was not going to come and be insulted. And he decided to travel to China to embarrass President Trump that, he could not make a deal with Modi. He could be a good ally. Obviously, India and China have no shared interest. They're actively conflicted about their present border. So this is a failure of diplomacy. We will see what the future holds with U.S.-Indian relations. But even though people are pressing for additional secondary sanctions, which would hit countries like India, unfortunately, President Trump has seriously affected the United States' future relationship with India with his actions to this day.
So, Andriy, thank you. It was great to hear your thoughts and see you next time.
Thank you very much. I can't wait for next time.
Oh, yeah.